Hello, today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite Ableton workflow related features. It's called key mapping. So without further ado, let's just jump straight in. So if you've never heard of key mapping before, it's essentially just Ableton's way of mapping any button in Ableton to any key on your keyboard. So if you hit Command K, that's the shortcut for key mapping. And anything with an orange box around it, all of these buttons, all of these knobs, all of these things over here, we can assign to a key on our keyboard. So I actually have a numerical keyboard, and all of the buttons on the side, none of them are assigned to anything. So I can assign pretty much whatever I want to any of those buttons. So for instance, I can just click this kick mute button, mute switch over here, and I can hit number 1, or this drums bus mute switch up here, I hit number 2, and then if I hit Command K again, you can see that if I hit those numbers, then it actually triggers that thing to occur. So in this case, it's actually like just turning off and on that track as I'm pressing those buttons. It's actually really useful features, and there's whole bunch of different things you can use with this, so that's kind of what we're going to be exploring today. By the way, if you want more handy workflow tips like this one, our Ableton Workflow Bible is packed with stuff like this, so go grab that one for free in the description below. Okay, so Shootouts. This is a really handy use for key mapping. I use it all the time, and it's actually a really good way to learn a little bit more about mixing, and a good use of third-party tools as well. So I've got 2 compressors here, and I've placed these on my drums bus. Maybe I'll just play the whole track for you first, so it just sounds like this. Anyway, the drums sound like this. It's kind of like a breakbeat style track. And I've just got a few compressors on here. So let's say I want to compress this drums bus, and I want to use a sort of third-party compressor. I just loaded up these 2 compressors because they're both quite simple compressors. This is the DBX160, and this is the CLA3A. So I've got this bypassed. So let's just look at this one first. And let's say I've dialed in the right amount of compression that I like. And I've got all the settings nicely. I'm not actually going to do that right now, but I'm just sort of using this as an example. Let's say I've got this one as I like as well. What I can actually do is hit Command K. I can click this and then assign this to a number, like let's say number 1 on my keyboard. And if I hit number 1 now, it turns it on and off. And what I can also do is assign it to this one, the same number, to both of the bypass switches. And if I hit them, it turns them both on and off. But where it becomes interesting is if I click one on and hit the number, it actually just swaps them. So this is a really good way of comparing 2 effects or plugins that are doing a similar role and comparing them together and seeing which one sounds better to you, so you can choose one or the other. So I often do this, maybe like 2 or even 3 compressors, and doing similar settings on all of them, or just maybe even doing them somewhat randomly and seeing which results are the best. So let's have a listen to this and swap back and forth. So this one is a whole bunch quieter, so I'm just going to turn up the gain. So another good way of doing this is sort of just hitting the button a whole bunch of times. I'm not looking at the screen right now, and sort of just closing your eyes and listening and hitting the button every now and then and seeing which one sounds better to your ears, and then whichever one you land on, you can delete the other one and just roll with that. So I've just used compressors here, but I also do this with EQs. I really like using sort of third-party EQs for this same purpose. And sort of just messing around with some of the knobs and seeing if I hit something I like by comparing it to a few different other things. You can also do this with distortion, whatever you want. This is just a really good way to train your ear and learn, and also just get the best results out of the plugins that you're using. So moving on, the next tip I wanted to talk about is using key mapping for controlling mono and side switches. So I've got these 2 utilities on my master, and I've created a mono and side switch. So to do this, you kind of just need to right click this knob and put it onto mid side mode, and then I make it just the mids. So I'm just listening to the middle, and then duplicate this and do the exact same thing, but turn the knob the other way, so you're just listening to the sides. And then you hit Command K, and you can map these buttons up here to keys on my keyboard. I've mapped them to numbers 8 and 9. So when I'm mixing or whenever I'm producing, if I want to check the mono compatibility of my track, I can just hit number 8 and then just be listening to the mono center of the track. And I can also hit number 9 if I just want to listen to the sides. So listening to that, I can tell that there is a little bit of bass in the sides that I would potentially want to cut out of the Juno track here. It just gives me a whole bunch of insight into this mix, and also it's just a really handy utility to have on hand at the click of a button whenever I want to use it. So how this best works is if you actually save it into your default set. So I've just made a new set in Ableton here, and this is what loads up as my default set. And if I wanted to save some key mapping into my default set, I would just go to my master track here, and I'd put these mono and side switches on the master as I have here, and I make sure I bypass them, and then hit Command K and do my key mapping in here. What I also want to do is, what I use quite often is if I go to this record button, I'm just going to hit this little squiggly button. So now whenever I want to record anything, if I hit Command K again, all I'll need to do is hit that button, and it's just going to automatically record things for me. So that's actually really useful just to have it as a one button knob and to save all these things into your default set. It's just going to really help with the workflow, so you don't have to set these things up every time you want to use them. So now I've got these things saved in my project. I'm just going to go up here and save this live set as my default set. And then I'm just going to title it whatever I want. So maybe September default 2022, like that. Okay, so the last one today is using key mapping for reference tracks. And so in this track here, got my full track all ready to go here, and I've been mixing it. Let's say this is actually a really old track, but the way I've done it, because I'm doing my mixing sessions in a different session, I bounced out all these pre-mix references. So I've got my full track here that I'm mixing, and then I've got the low end, which is just the kick and the bass before I started mixing. And I mapped that to the number 2 on my keyboard, so I can quickly swap between my track when I'm mixing the low end and then the pre-mix low end. And then the drums, I've just bounced them out separately, pre-mix drums. And I've mapped that to number 3. Same with just the pre-mix reference overall. And then we've got our external reference track. I've mapped that to another thing. So I can quickly swap between all of these things. You could just go ahead and click the solo buttons as well, but maybe I'm just a little bit lazier than that. I'd rather have them mapped to buttons so I just don't have to think about it, and I can just easily swap between them. So let's have a little go here. Down here, it's just instantaneously swapping between all of these things. So it's a really cool workflow trick. There's so many different things that you can do with key mapping. This by no means is like the be all and end all of all the things you can do. I would recommend experimenting around and seeing what things you can come up with by mapping multiple things to the same button, things to different buttons, and combining buttons together. Pretty much just anything that can be turned on or off can be mapped to the press of a key. So get experimental with it and see what things you can come up with. If you have any cool key mapping related workflow tips or tricks that you use, definitely leave them in the comments below. I'd love to have a read and check them out myself. So thank you so much for watching. It was a bit of a shorter video today. I hope you've enjoyed the workflow tips in this one. If you have enjoyed, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.